Hello, everyone. Welcome to the penultimate episode of Neon Genesis Evanglorio, our watch/rewatch of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I'm your host, Jel, and with me I have my co-hosts, Iro and G.
Hello, hello.
Yep, hi.
And these are exciting times because with this episode we have finished the TV series. With episodes 24 through 26. And I'm sure we probably won't have a lot to say about 25 and 26 content-wise, but I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about them in general.
That's a good way to put it.
Yes, that will be interesting. We'll loop back on some of our previous discussions. I think that now would be an appropriate time for, but we'll get to that later. But before we get to that, we have to talk about episode 24, which is kind of the last quote-unquote normal episode, I guess.
Last, like, real episode? Yeah.
Yes, of the series. So episode 24 is the beginning of the end, or knocking on heaven's door. And, we kick things off with a little checkup on Asuka's current state, and she's not doing well at all.
No, she it's a real fall from grace here in episode 24, I feel like.
Yeah. They give us a couple little snippets of flashback with her as a child again, and they kind of give a more extended, detailed version of when her mother died. Apparently it was, Asuka just found out she's going to be a pilot, and she was so excited only to find her mother hung herself.
So I have a question about this scene, actually, because
yes.
I don't know if we mentioned it in the prior podcast, but wasn't the implication, I think, of one of the prior episodes with Asuka's backstory that Asuka was almost the victim of a murder-suicide attempt from her mother? At least I feel like that was kind of what was hinted at.
I don't think those were related.
So the thing is that after some sort of incident, Asuka's mother, lost part of her mind.
Yes, I'm familiar with that part.
Thought the doll was, treated her doll like it was actually Asuka, and treated the real Asuka like she was some stranger, and then murder-suicided with the doll that she assumed was Asuka.
I see. Okay, yes. Okay, that makes... All right, that tracks.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I just, for some reason, in my brain, I thought of them as separate incidents, but...
Right, so basically the implication being that her intent was to... to take Asuka with her.
So we kind of walk through from that to another snippet of her kind of being in denial about Kaji's death, I guess. They don't really show a whole lot of it, just kind of imply.
Yeah. I mean, how would any of the other people know, I guess, realistically, other than Misato?
I assume the news is disseminated by this point.
I guess that's true. I guess I feel like Nerve's standard operating procedure has been keep the children in the dark as much as possible. So,
well, I mean, Shinji might have been able to figure it out from Misato.
Right.
Yes, he did see her.
He heard the message and saw her reaction.
Yes, you're right. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. Why? And maybe Shinji again. They don't. I kind of like they kind of just let you fill in the blanks on this. They just give you the little snippet of it.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe Shinji felt obligated to tell her or something, but
feels like less obligated, more like he kind of says it in the heat of the moment in yet another fight between Asuka and Shinji here.
So, nevertheless, this kind of all leads to us finding Asuka in her present state.
Yeah. Just kind of like almost comatose in like a bathtub in some like destroyed apartment.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people's reads on this is she may have also tried to kill herself at this point. I don't know if that's accurate.
My understanding is like cultural tropes of the folded clothes next to her is supposed to indicate that.
Right.
Like, I'm not 100% sure. This is what I've heard.
Yeah, I guess, yes. I mean, I think that the vibe you definitely... I mean, whether she was going to intentionally try to kill herself or not, I think the definite intention of that scene is to communicate, like, Asuka has completely lost the will to live. Like, she is in this bathtub and she is ready to die. Like,
she's given up.
You know...
Right.
You know,
whether she is actively trying to kill herself or just like doing so via exposure.
Away. Yes. I mean, like, I feel usually the visual shorthand for bathtub suicide is the slit wrists, but we don't really get any indication of that. So
yeah, either way, she's basically given up after losing her ability to pilot the Evangelion. We do kind of end with Nerve Secret Service finding her and bringing her in again. So she's still...
like they did with Shinji that one time.
Yes. So
at least they're good at their jobs, I guess.
So they may still have use for her yet, but
track down a 14-year-old child.
Yeah. So we go from that. There's a brief bit with Shinji trying to piece together some kind of connection between Rei and his mother. I don't know if he really comes to any conclusion here, but
he's realized that something's there.
I think he's getting close. Yeah, like I think had he been given another couple of episodes to like think this through instead of what the next couple of episodes actually are, I think he would have. I think he would have figured something out.
Yeah. So in case we as the audience hadn't figured out there was something going on there, well, there you go.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a real brief thing that kind of leads into we catch up with Ritsuko, who's now in custody after destroying the dummy plug system and killing all the Reis. I feel like this scene was maybe the biggest reminder to me that I guess of all the things that may not have aged well in Evangelion, it's kind of how I feel like the women are entirely defined by their relationship to the men, and it's usually not a very flattering.
Yeah, I think of the two like older female characters, I think Misato gets out of this a little bit better, but I think Ritsuko unfortunately like really kind of gets the short end of the stick.
Yeah, she's the worst. She's the worst case of it. Like, but yeah,
like like I'm not saying like, oh, she's a strong, independent woman, blah 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 blah, but it's more like she's initially portrayed as like the de facto number 2 of Nerve, right? Like when Gendo's out and Misato is unfit or there was that episode a while back where the implication is that actually Ritsuko can relieve Misato of command anytime she wants.
Right.
Like there's this understanding that she actually wields like an enormous amount of authority. And so to kind of like reduce her character, like, she's actually like the stilted, like aging shrew who is like actually just deeply like
just like her mother.
Yeah, right. Like just like like mother, like daughter, and like the whole like, she's just the older woman who's like insecure about the new younger hotness that the man that's the source of her affections is eyeing, and it's like. It's really a shame. I will say I think Ritsuko does get one pretty good line in here where like I think Gendo is like, is it Gendo? Actually, this might have been the last episode. I'm sorry. Where Gendo is like, was like, you've committed murder, and Ritsuko is like, I've destroyed property. Like in reference to the
was that in the scene? It would have had to been, right?
That might have been. It's either this one or when she was talking with Misato. I honestly forget which, but
that's a pretty good line. Though.
I was thinking about that line over the last week or so. I was like, that's a pretty good like that's a pretty good jab. But
yeah, it is like because it is all the like even the Rei and Asuka. Asuka has Kaji and Rei too. Anyway, is defined by Gendo, right? But the Ritsuko feels like the worst kind of case of it because she is like G said, not only have authority, she's also like arguably the smartest person and maybe even the most important person on the planet because you don't have operational Evangelions without her, right? So
right.
So to reduce her to like the stilted woman,
yes,
it is unfortunate. And I mean, look, here's the thing: if I'm going to be charitable, which maybe Ava doesn't necessarily deserve. There can always be the read that like what Evangelion is really trying to say is that like no matter intentions or skill set or talent, like humans will always like fall victim to like their most like basest like instincts and desires. Like that is certainly like a read you can do in science fiction. There's a lot of great sci-fi out there that have done the like, oh, these like, you know, great scientists and soldiers and philosophers and artists, etc., blah blah blah, get brought down by the, you know, like they cannot escape human weakness.
Right.
I think the problem then, though, is that read feels like it's only ever applied to the female characters in this show.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
at most you could say Shinji is no, because Shinji is not portrayed as like necessarily like talented. Like, and even Gendo is like, he doesn't like you can't even say that because like Gendo's flaws are like intrinsically like defined in a or portrayed and defined in a different way than like Ritsuko or Misato or Asuka's flaws. And I think that, you know, it is a shame because I think this show has done some very good character work with these characters. I think that also as we kind of get towards the end here, a kind of kind of an overarching like theme I have in my take on Eva here is that Evangelion and Gainax and Anno or whatever are beginning to like just like start writing checks that they cannot cash. Like they just do not have the like, they don't actually have the time or the budget or the nuance to like pull off some of the like very bold like character tropes they're playing with.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. If we're talking like beyond the obvious, you know, physical production of it, but I think we'll get more into that later. But yeah, so we have. Is this? I mean, this is pretty much Ritsuko's last significant scene, right?
Yeah, this is the last we see of her in the real world, so to speak.
Right. So, you know, we cut away from that to a bit of a montage with Shinji kind of realizing he's alone again. Everyone's pretty much gone. Misato's off doing her investigation, trying to figure out what's going on. Asuka was at this point nowhere to be found. All the kids at school have they've all gone back home at this point.
Yeah, they've just written, you know, they've shooed out all the comic relief and side characters.
Right. Yeah,
that said, I wanted to bring this up last podcast, and I feel like this is the time I have to bring it up now because they specifically say, "Oh, Kensuke and Toji have moved out of Tokyo 3." Can I just get this off my chest? And that I think that the Toji arc of Evangelion was done super well, but then the aftermath of it was like unbelievably poorly handled. Like the whole.
You mean after the fight?
Yes.
Okay.
Like the whole thing with like Toji is like, oh, we can't let Shinji know, it'll break his heart if he finds out Toji's piloting an Eva. And then once Shinji actually finds out Toji's piloting an Eva, he never speaks to Toji ever again. Like we don't even like, I'm sure this is maybe like a budget thing, but like we don't even get like a scene of like Shinji like visiting Toji in the hospital. Like,
well, I wonder if he actually even did, though. That's a good question. I mean,
maybe he didn't, but then I feel like they should have like made it a plot point that like Shinji could not bring himself to like see Toji. But like, it's just so weird that they like build up Toji's character so much in those few episodes, and like they build up like how much like Toji's fate hurts Shinji.
Right.
But then Toji, the character himself, is never like actually addressed or featured ever again, and it just seems like. Maybe that's like maybe that's just a time thing. Maybe that's a scheduling thing. Like, oh shit, we don't have time to like fit Toji into this plot anymore.
Right after he served his main narrative purpose.
Right, but that just makes how he was used in the plot feel even more mercenary. Like, oh, we're just gonna build up this character for the sole purpose of breaking him down, and then once he has been broken, we don't need him anymore for the plot. And like, I feel like that's, I don't know. Like, I think that. Yeah. Conclusions are just as important, like aftermaths are just as important to character arcs as their peaks and their climaxes. And I feel like it's really weird that we don't even get like an offhand line about like, I don't know, oh, I can't bring myself to see Toji in the hospital or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that is a little bit of a missed opportunity. I personally didn't even think about it. I completely forgot about Toji, but I might just I don't know. But
I mean, I'm not even saying, oh, Toji, fucking secret best character of the show, though maybe actually. I'm just saying that like for how like it is weird now. Like, you know, I don't want to get into it too much, but it is weird now. Like looking at Evangelion now, having finished the TV show, like seeing what people talk about, right? Seeing what people, oh wow, this character had such an impact on me growing up. This character is so major to the story, and motherfucker. Fifth child doesn't show for more than 15 goddamn minutes in this whole show. Whereas like Toji, like a character who like generally receives like maybe some of the best and most like nuanced characterization in this entire show is never spoken of in like the wider discourse of Evangelion. And that is like wild to me.
You
that,
know
like,
in your heart why. You know the answer to this.
I know the answer, and I am saying it is fucking absurd how warped the like priorities of the Evangelion discourse are. Like how like fucking like just completely like off base these people are, and it's just so damn strange to me now that I'm like actually familiar with these characters. I can actually ask like, why the fuck have people never talked about these characters when they actually do matter?
Yeah, I think I can see where you're coming from on that. I do think, you know, putting aside, you know, we're of course referring to the appearance of Kaoru in this episode, who went on to become one of the most popular, you know, characters, even though he's only in one episode. I agree, you know, there is a lot of the, you know, popularity based on the, you know, the shipping, if you will, for us to find a succinct term for it.
Of course, I mean, I'm not denying this.
But I do think he actually does play an important thematic role here. But, you know, I agree, you know, maybe that was a bit of a missed opportunity to tie a bow on the Toji.
You know, I think there is a conversation to be had here, but we should probably just finish recapping this episode before we should finish this before we start talking about a character we haven't even
yes. So yeah, let's
recap yet. So.
Yeah, let's talk about the appearance of Kaoru, who you know,
it's just fucking chilling on like a gargoyle or something.
Yeah, something
like angel statue.
Yeah.
Like a statue.
So Shinji's feeling kind of lonely at this point because all his friends are gone, and he happens to find a new friend. This weird, very good-looking guy sitting on a rock somewhere or whatever.
Who does not talk like a normal human. Like, let me make this clear. Like, it is astounding to me that nobody... Like, Shinji I can forgive because he's a stupid child. But everybody else just, like... not having any objections to the strange white-haired, red-eyed child who refers to his fellow humans as the children of the Lilim. Am I right, guys? Am I right, my fellow kids of the Lilim? Shit. Like, I thought, you know, I get it. Shinji he's a dumb but also emotionally vulnerable child who is desperate for some kind of affection. Like, he is the guy who is like going to overlook all the strange stuff Kaworu says because Kaworu also says, "Hey, you look pretty," or "I like talking to you," and like Shinji's just like, "Well, who cares? What is a child?
It's really nice of you to say."
Yeah. What child of Lilim anyways, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but, that is there's certainly no red flags here, right?
Yeah,
I guess we do see Misato spying on him later, right? Which we'll talk about. But
he's the fucking super binocs she's got.
So I guess she's at least a little bit suspicious, but even so. So, you know, they kind of meet and hit it off for a bit, but we'll get more into them later. We see a lot more of the glasses guy, who I still can't remember his name to this point in this episode.
With the bridge bunny?
Yeah, who we are...
Hyuga, right?
Yeah, we're running out of people who are alive and able to help Misato, but we see a couple times... I put it in the notes, but I kind of forget what it actually does in this part.
Hyuga basically hacks the mainframe to find out
where Ritsuko is, right?
Ritsuko is, and also to try and find information on Kaworu.
Yes.
And basically all you can find out is that all of Kaworu's information has already been conveniently blacked out and erased.
Just like Ray.
Yes.
Yup.
So yeah, so he is actually, like we said, we don't have a very deep bench here at Evangelion, so we've gone to.
Hey, look, frankly, I am disappointed we did not get our 2-episode arc about like Hyuga and air guitar guy hanging out with like Maya on their like day off or something. Like that should have been an episode of this damn show.
Yeah, we could have fit that in with 26 episodes, right?
Yeah, totally. Who the fuck needs that episode of what is the most redundant episode of this show? Probably one of the recaps.
Yeah, we could have cut one of those recap episodes, the first one at least. Right?
Anyways, they got to do their sync tests, and in case you were not already like deeply suspicious of Kaworu, because we the viewer already like understand like what is required to achieve a high sync rate with an Evangelion, we find out that Kaworu syncs with O2 like perfectly fine, like doesn't even need to reconfigure the core. They don't have to change the settings on Unit 2. Just Kaworu gets in there and he's good to go.
Yeah, nothing to be alarmed at here at all.
Can't believe Kaworu uses inverted controls.
Yes, like that is like what is going on here. Like no, you know Kaworu's doing.
If you like, Asuka has remapped all the buttons on her keyboard, uses inverted. Kaworu just jumps on, starts using it like totally fine.
No, like I was gonna say maybe even worse. Like Kaworu is like the guy who like turns on horizontal invert and is like totally fine with it.
That's evil.
And that's what I mean. Yeah. That is the tier.
He moves with numpad. He's got horizontal invert.
Does he like fucking? Does he crouch with like the C key or some shit? Actually, that's pretty normal. Crouching with the X key is much weirder.
Yeah.
I don't know why the fuck that is the.
That's.
Anyways,
Yeah.
Yeah, like point is that is the tier of vibes you should be getting from Kaworu in this scene of like this boy ain't right.
Yeah, and it kind of that discussion kind of bleeds into after the sync test. He runs across Ray and has yet another totally not ominous conversation where he's like,
"Hey, you're like me."
I mean, you can tell by looking.
Right.
Yes. The
eyes. Both have like the red eyes.
The eyes have it, so they say.
We are the form of the Lilum who inhabit this planet.
Yes.
Right. Yes. This is the part where I think also I have never had an issue with Evangelion's world building. I have always like enjoyed or at least tolerated it. I have always like loved the stuff they say. You know, when they say, "Oh, we've passed the fucking what limit or whatever the." Fucking,
right.
Whatever that threshold
or whatever, right? Right. Yes, or like we have like, you know, or blah blah blah, or like, oh, we're gonna have to redraw the map of Tokyo again, or like, you know, all the world building, like even like the most like heady stuff, I have generally enjoyed because I think it is like it does the thing that I think all good mecha anime does. Like again, to speak to things that like Ava draws from, like the best mecha anime know how to like just play with like gonzo bullshit terms in ways that like yes are bullshit but also still like catch your interest. And
what Tsurumaki call it, the bluff aesthetics.
Yes, that's, you know, we could get into a whole conversation here about Tsurumaki's bluff aesthetics philosophy of like narrative fiction. You know, I mean, and I think that is something Ava does very well. Its bluff aesthetics are S tier during like the first like 2/3 of this show. I think here, like, I think Iro was like watched me kind of like try to like mentally work my way through like episode 24's world building, and I think it is starting to get into just like plain old bullshit territory. You know,
it's like my sort of charitable take is that Kaworu is so alien that like the things he's talking about makes no sense to anyone.
Right, like I think
that is my charitable take.
There's definitely the read that Kaworu is written to be intentionally obtuse in the way he talks, because even though he takes the form of a human, he doesn't actually really understand them that well. But like, I don't know, just the fact that like the focus of so much of this episode is like, oh no, that wasn't Adam on the cross, it was Lilith, and blah blah blah, and the like, fight between Lilith of the Dark Moon and Adam of the like the all this stuff. It's like so like just thrown out there, but like with none of like the actual supporting like framework you need to like make for good like believable world building.
Right. Yeah,
like its relevance to the actual plot is not clear at all.
It's like non-existent. You know? Like it barely matters to like the actual overarching plot of this show.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about the finding a Lilith bit later, but yeah, no, it's these are the things that start sparking the fanboys trying to read deep into the meanings and unravel all the plot details,
and that's. Right, and that's the thing. Like, you know, I think, you know, I've always like made the joke about how like fucking like, you know, Evangelion is a show that is like all like fucking philosophical flash and no substance. But like, I generally think this show has a lot of substance. But I think it was with episodes 24 through 26 where I was finally like, oh, actually, maybe that hot take of mine was actually not that hot, because like. Every like fucking like heady think piece about like the last 2 episodes of Evangelion I've ever read on the internet, like now that I've actually watched these episodes, I'm like, oh, y'all were like fucking trying to squeeze blood from a stone. Like y'all were like trying to like fucking grasp some trying to like meaningful like message from like the most like just off the cuff like bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, we'll kind of save more of that for after 25 and 26.
Yes,
we're still in a.
But what really matters here is
they're bathing together.
Yes, is Kaworu and Shinji's bathing session.
Yeah, so
you know, with the big fucking TV screen and I guess the nerve-sanctioned bathhouse.
So I wanted to go off on a small tangent on this, if you guys will
Please do.
Please do.
Yes.
So I wanted to.
That's all.
I wanted to talk. I wanted to talk about one of the popular rumors that came out of Evangelion was the suggestion that Kaworu was based on Kunihiko Ikuhara. Who
I've heard of this. I've heard this rumor before.
Who at this time was wrapping up Sailor Moon and starting production on Revolutionary Girl Utena, and apparently him and Anno were hanging out a lot at this point. And
yes,
I've heard some people say Anno confirmed this, but I didn't find any primary sources on that. I did find
find
an interview with Ikuhara himself, though, where they asked him this question, and he was very coy, as Ikuhara always is. But he basically said there was a specific time where him and Anno stayed up drinking in an open air bath and talking all night, and that is probably, if there's any inspiration behind the character, that's probably one of the main reasons why anybody would think that.
Yes, I could certainly see that, you know, with that explanation.
And he then proceeded to go on to a pretty accurate breakdown of Karu's character and Shinji and Evangelion, and a couple things that even I was going to bring up in my final thoughts. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting because he was saying how, you know, they were asking. I think the translation was a little rough on the interview, but it said something to the effect. I think they asked him, has he ever said to anyone, you know, you're fine just the way you are? And he's like, well, you know, isn't that something that I'm always saying to people, you know, again, being coy about it. But I guess is
Anno worthy of Ikuhara's
grace? They did ask him about that too. Did he ever say, well, you know, I love you or whatever at that part? And he's like, I don't think I did. You know, again, he was playing coy. But anyway, I guess my point is, if we're using this again as sort of a bit of an allegory for, if that is true, which it seems like it is, at least in some part. I don't know if it's meant to be a one-on-one. This, you know, Kaworu is Ikuhara, but I think it seems like there would be some inspiration from it, and, you know, this being an allegory for Anno's own feelings, kind of interesting.
I mean, I hope that if that is true, that does not imply that Ikuhara is also a fucking creep like Kaworu, because
Oh, I don't know.
The
I've
scene
seen
actually
a couple of car shows.
Because the scene actually leads to the bathhouse is like it is some very like I mean it is some very cute but also kind of sad shit where like Shinji is like doing the thing that like people do of like waiting in a place they know that the person they want to run into is going to be. And it's like Shinji's like, "Oh, hey, what a coincidence, Kaworu! I was just chilling out here. Like, I don't have anywhere to go. You know, I need to go take a shower before I go home." And Kaworu's just like, "You want to go together?" And it's like,
yeah,
like, man, Kaworu is just fucking
there's probably a lot to be talked about in here because obviously this is and we've I think we very very briefly touched on this in the Netflix podcast about the you know, "You're Worthy of My Grace" translation question or whatever,
right?
And you know, the nature of Kaoru and Shinji's, or maybe more importantly Shinji's feelings, because I think Kaoru is just supposed to be because he's supposed to come off weird, and maybe they lay it on a little too thick.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess it's more like. Sorry,
yeah, I mean, they probably lay it on maybe a little too thick, like we were saying before. But he's supposed to be kind of weird and inhuman, and like, but you know, there's that. You can see how it appeals. It would appeal to Shinji that he's finally has somebody who's like showing him unconditional love, right? Whether it's real or not, but from his perspective.
And that's, I guess that was definitely my problem, is that like having heard so much about Kaworu prior to watching Evangelion, hearing about the legacy of Kaworu, the impact of Kaworu, like the significance of Kaworu, like, you know, watching this episode, like Kaworu just feels like really manipulative. Like he's just saying the things that Shinji wants to hear. At least that is the vibe I constantly get from him. Like,
it's like to me, sorry to interrupt, but I think to me it felt like the logical like final step of how over the past several episodes the angels have been trying to like make contact with the humans in more and more insidious ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Like ever since Shinji got sucked into the sea of D-Rock or whatever.
They've been evolving and adapting to get to their goal, right? And
yeah. And what I mean is that because of that context, as Iro said, it makes it feel like, oh, Kaworu, like whether Kaworu is actually a person or not, deserving of personhood or whatever, like everything he says just feels like the culmination of like the past like 4 or 5 angels. And like just like we have created this, like, you know, we all joke, right, about how like, oh, a character in this game or this anime feels like a waifu created in a lab to like just appeal to like as many like interests as possible. That's what Kaworu feels like. Kaworu feels like the angels have like, we have perfected it, the perfect like the perfect like,
way to finally get down there.
Yeah, it's like the perfect shit. Yeah, the perfect.
Let us in. We won't have to punch them, and we won't have to blow them up. They'll just in.
Yeah, all we have to do is kiss them. Who knew it was so easy? Like, so like because of that context, it's hard for me to like. It's just hard for me to like feel sympathy or interest in Kaworu as a character.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's the angle of people desperate for some kind of, you know, representation for, you know, people asking, you know, is Shinji gay or whatever, and like I don't think there's enough evidence here to support that per se. But could you read into that? I don't know, but. You know, whenever you get those situations, you know, we see that time and again with anime where people are willing to swallow a lot in the name of, you know, getting some kind of, you know, representation or something that they can,
in the name of like, in the name of crumbs and scraps,
which you know, I'm not going to begrudge anybody that. So I think that's you know, that's part of it, and I mean, you can see why, but from the cold hard logical standpoint, yes, it's like you can definitely see this is a trap. Like they've been evolving this, you know, they've been getting closer and closer. We've seen them switch from physical attacks to mental attacks. they've been probing Shinji and Asuka for like what are their weaknesses, and like you said, it's like they've developed in a lab a weapon to, you know, get to Shinji and, you know, let his guard down.
Yes.
So,
but we should probably move on and get into Gendo's weird hand.
Yeah.
Can we just talk about this? What?
Well,
we all saw that fetus that was that fetus was Adam,
yes,
right?
Yes, they said that way back
when. Known as Adam, the thing
like
that like. Yes,
yeah, then they definitely like grew it big and crucified it in Eternal Dogma, guys.
Right, because the reveal of Adam later in the show, I was like, wait, that's Adam? That's the thing that got down here with like that Kaji brought over like in episode 6? But no, it turns out that Adam is still chilling out on like grafted to like Gendo's like hand. It reminds me of like when like the light snake thing like fucking fought Shinji and the little rays started like growing out of his arm.
Yeah.
Like what? And I'm really disappointed because now having watched all 3 of these episodes, they don't fucking do jack shit with that reveal.
Like, I guess spoilers will come back to that in Evangelion, but yes, they do give us a glimpse of the. You know, Gendo does have Adam on his hand, and you know we'll find out later that the thing on the cross is not Adam; it's Lilith. But
yes.
And we get a bit of Sele one more time, who once again are not happy with Gendo, and this time they really mean it. They've had enough.
Yeah, time they mean it. It only took fucking like 15 episodes.
24 episodes.
Yes, really basically 24 episodes of Sele being like, Gendo, I swear to God, if you do this again. And Gendo be like, fuck you. Y'all
this is your third strike, Gendo.
Right, and like they said it was your third strike like fucking like 10 episodes ago, you know.
5 strikes ago.
Like, but no, this time they actually
they do mean it though, which will
yes, because we find out, is it here where we find out where is this the part where Kaworu has the fucking like weird conversation that makes me now no longer capable of telling what Sele actually is?
That's going to come up in a minute when Masato sees him, right?
Right. They have the sleepover first.
So you know, I did want to say our last farewell to Pen Pen, because this is like, I think this is the last time we see the apartment, right? Like,
right, not counting.
I mean, not counting episode 26.
In quote unquote reality, it's the last time we're at Misato's apartment, and all the lights are off, and she's saying goodbye to Pen Pen, who's going to a better place. Going to go live off to a farm.
You're gonna go to the farm upstate. You're gonna go live with Ritsuko's grandma, and their dearly departed cat.
Replace the cat or whatever. I don't know, but you know, it's kind of
I mean, you know, this is this is like the classic. This is the classic like shooing out the clowns trope, right? Like this is the moment in the show where they're like, you know, this and like shipping, you know, Kensuke and Toji out of the plot. Like this is the part where they're like, all right, like all of you like side characters who have been here to like add a little like lighthearted flavor to the show, like you are no longer, your services are no longer needed. Like from where we're going from here on out, like you are not gonna, you don't want to be around here. You do not want to be around this plot where things are going.
So goodbye, Pen Pen.
Yep.
And then we move along to the sleepover. I guess Shinji decides to stay with Kaoru at his quarters at Nerve, I'm assuming, or I don't know if he has another
very small
I don't know if he has another
room.
apartment or whatever. Either way, they're shacked up for a bit. And I don't know if really there's much more to add to that we didn't talk about at the bath scene, other than
yeah, I mean, I think this conversation is kind of just more of like them trying to like explain, or not explain, but show like why Kaworu and Shinji hit it off so well. But like at the end of the day, it's just this whole episode has been weird for me because like it's hard for me to understand why Shinji is so receptive to Kaworu's advances when like like after they've had a few conversations, I guess I get it now, but like I feel like Shinji's always his initial instinct is to recoil from people, right? Like no matter how nice or genuine or open they might seem at first, like Shinji's instinct is still to like try to run away. You know what I'm saying? But like Kaworu is like the first person where he's like not done that, and like
yeah, I mean there's a couple of ways I guess you could take it. For one, you know, they kind of, if we look at Shinji's, I guess, personal growth from the beginning of the series, where he was happy doing nothing, living with his teacher, where towards the end now, and we had the scene earlier where he's kind of sad with everybody leaving, like he now kind of, I guess, depends on that kind of like support from other people, right? Like that's he's grown in that way where he, you know, that to, and maybe not in the healthiest way at this stage, but you know, so I mean, I think you could take that as he's, you know, A, vulnerable, and B, maybe more receptive to you know, befriending people or whatever.
Yeah, no.
Especially for, like we were saying before, somebody who's, at least to him, appears to be unconditionally, you know, right,
Mr. Perfect,
who seems to, you know, generally be interested and care about him, not just because he's a naval pilot, or at least that's the way he's looking at it.
I guess that's true. Yes.
I mean, again, are they laying on a little thick?
Yes.
Is this happening too fast? You know, maybe you could argue that, but I think that's the the takeaway, that, or at least my interpretation of, you know, how we've arrived at this point.
Right.
So yeah, we kind of, so this is the scene you were talking about, G, where we see Kaoru just talking to Seele in the middle of nowhere.
Right, like this is not like in the Black Room. Like Kaworu is like standing in the middle of like a pond on top of another gargoyle statue and having a conversation with the floating ring of Seele holograms, and like,
yeah.
Now I thought I had a concept of what Seele was like as a like tangible organization. Now I got no fucking clue, my dude.
Did he like swim out there, or take like a swan boat, or
yeah, like how did he get there? Like did he fly?
Well, we see later he can fly.
Like
he floats later.
Yeah, so did he just like float across the pond into to like fucking A, like you call Misato, like, you know, I don't think Misato was spying that hard. I think any person could have been like, yo, what the fuck is that person floating across this lake?
Yeah, so so I guess the implications of this conversation is that, and with the rest of they kind of say it more explicitly later, is that Kaoru has been sent by Seele, but
right, they note that he has the soul of Adam within him, but that Adam's remains are with Gendo. So
he's trying to get to Adam, right? Like apparently all the angels have been trying to do. But yeah, I put, you know, I was being sarcastic in the Misato Katsuragi super spy in the notes, but she does see him while he's talking, and we get the kind of the creepy shot of him turning around looking at her, even though she's like a mile away with her super binoculars. So
a good pair of binoculars.
Those are some good binoculars, but
okay, but can they scan S++ rank soldiers? For later.
Sure, let's slip in a random Metal Gear 5 reference, but yeah. So Misato is basically Misato's whole thing since Kaji's been gone is just she's just trying to figure out everything going on and
just uncover the mystery of Nerve. I think that's kind of her like sole focus at
purpose
this point
since Kaji died. So yeah, so it's around here where Kaoru decides to it's time to spring into action.
They just let him in.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's the new designated pilot of Unit 2, right? So
yes. Yeah, so he takes over Unit 2 and starts going after Terminal Dogma.
There's this quick shot. They're like, "How do Unit 2 activate? Where's Asuka?" And she's like, "They're still in her medical room." We cut to like the camera shot of her staring wide-eyed at the ceiling in her
so like her hospital room, eyes wide shut, like shit. Like, the fact that is the last scene of Asuka, like, in the quote-unquote real world in this show is, like, you know, I think I said in the last podcast that, like, I didn't really, like, feel anything emotional for the characters, but if the closest I do, if I feel anything for these characters, it's definitely Asuka, like, because, you know, you just think of, like, fucking jackass Asuka from episode, like, 6, like, fucking...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now's my chance. I'm gonna fucking stab the shit out of this angel with my knife. I got a cool cloak. Like, to fucking, like, what seems to be, like, comatose Asuka, like, fucking hooked up to an IV tube or some shit. And it's just like, man, like we said, like, I don't know, man. Like we said, Ritsuko got a raw deal. I feel like actually maybe Asuka got an even rawer deal in some ways. Like her characterization was not as maybe problematic as Ritsuko's, but the sheer fall from grace here.
Because I feel like Asuka was like an annoying kid, but like she didn't deserve this, right? Like,
no, she
right.
Yeah, like, this is a lot.
This is a fate a character such as her truly did not deserve, But Unit 2 making its way down to Terminal Dogma. Kaworu is officially revealed as the 17th
and final angel. He pilots Unit 2 by just floating around its head. He doesn't even need to get in it.
Yes.
And he's making a beeline to Terminal Dogma. So, you know, they sort Shinji in Unit 1. Yeah. Shinji is pissed.
Shinji's mad.
Yes,
he feels
betrayed, and now he's angry. He's got to fight this guy who seemed to be his friend. So they
have this like crazy falling knife fight down the shaft.
This fight is like, man, we say, you know, I mean, look, like Gainax truly, I think, did their best with what they could in Eva. I think the show undeniably though fell apart at the end, but this is a pretty decent fight they got here, man. This is just a solid fucking slugfest or knife fest.
Unit 1 and 2 having a knife fight while falling down a giant elevator shaft or whatever.
Like Silo is a good mecha set.
At some point he tries to stab Karu or something, and Karu has his own AT field, and Karu reveals all kinds of things about things we probably already knew about, you know, the AT field being inside us all along. You know, that being
yes,
the real AT field was with you the whole time.
Yes, we find out that AT fields are,
the friends we met along the way.
Kaworu phrases it, is the wall everyone has in their heart.
Yes, which is that we keep people out with or whatever. Yes.
It's our hedgehog quills.
Yes, the hedgehog quills. Yep. That's one way of putting it. Yes. So they're fighting their way down. We did catch a glimpse of Masato talking again, the glasses guy, and her backup plan here to basically nuke the whole thing if he makes it into the Terminal Dogma, which pretty much is what happens. I
mean, yes, there's kind of a good sense of like, just like, I don't know, like, I mean, I feel like the Masato I know and love is the Masato that's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get a bunch of cables and we're gonna plug them all into every power plant in Japan. Whereas Masato at this point is just like, fucking, just blow it all up.
What other options does she have at this point, right?
I know she doesn't, but it's just like, fuck it.
Yeah, we're
blow
it
all up.
We're out of time. We're out of options. We're out of everything.
Yeah,
just blow it all up.
Yeah.
So
yes,
we get to Terminal Dogma. Kaoru enters. He's like temporarily disabled Shinji. Well, he didn't disable him, but Shinji's tied up fighting Unit 2, so he floats in by himself.
Worth noting that Ota Joy is playing
totally
this whole sequence.
Right, yes. Yes, that is what is happening. Yes, my brain had briefly forgotten that detail.
I love that.
I can't believe Evangelion crossed over with classical.
I love that part of it, but yeah, he gets into Terminal Dogma and okay, so just tying back around to our conversation earlier about the Adam and Lilith stuff. I guess the only point you really need to take away on this is the fact that he was expecting to see Adam, and he discovers that it's not Adam, it is Lilith. And so whatever,
right. But like, to what end? I guess like
right, so that's the thing, is to what
whatever
end, right?
whatever
like,
plan he had is not going to work now. Is basically what we're
yes.
meant to take away from here. And you know, again, they did. I feel like we can maybe revisit that in End of Evangelion, but that's all we know at the time, and I guess that's all we can know at this point. Is, you know, plan's not going to work for Kaoru. So Shinji breaks free after sticking a knife in Unit 2's face, and just walks up and grabs Kaoru, and
Ray's here as well for some reason.
Right, yeah, she's just like hanging out. She puts up an AT field so that nobody can see
they mention
what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, because they mentioned Kaoru has like this, you know, massive AT field, and then there's another AT field just like it there, and we find out it's Ray. But yeah, so Kaoru Shinji grabs him with Unit 1, and we have Kaoru's final moments, which is one of the most famous shots in anime ever. And our final super uncomfortably long pause of the series.
Yes,
where
one is,
Shinji has to kill Kaoru because he's an angel, but he doesn't want to do it. And you know, he sits there for an uncomfortably long period of time until he finally squishes him.
Yeah, but
I do like it a lot.
I do like. This is one of those like long pauses I think is done well because, like, you know, regardless of whether this was intentional or because, again, they ran out of money, I think this is one of those ones that does work because, like, you know, there's often the talk of, especially in mecha anime, there is, you know, one of the like most prevailing themes in mecha anime that I think Eva often, you know, I mean, Eva takes like many of its tropes, many of its mecha tropes to its like logical, philosophical conclusion is kind of the humanistic philosophy of kind of like the robot as a representation of like the pilot's self, you know, like the robot is the physical, like is like the physical extension of the pilot, you know, the robot is its best self in many ways, you know, the robot is the idealized self, and it is also the self that can act as like the armor, you know, the thing that can afford to fight and be destroyed. And so like that is often one of the primary tropes of mecha anime. But one of the things that, you know, obviously cannot be communicated as effectively is that usually, you know, barring certain types of mecha anime, the mechs don't emote. They don't have faces. They can't talk. When the pilot talks, the mech does not talk. And
Grimlogon's mouth moves when they're talking and makes same expressions.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a very effective, like, that's a fun, like, take on it. But for most anime, like most mecha anime, like even super robot anime, like Mazinger or Getter, you don't see the pilot's expressions unless you have a view into their cockpit. And I think that actually then Anno or whoever, like, key shot of this scene does something really effective here. For the first time in a while, this is one of the things I actually have to truly hand it to Evangelion. This is a trope that I don't think is done nearly as often. This silence actually disconnects the pilot from the robot, like, because usually when the pilot emotes, you know what's going on because they'll have like a Tomino style like cut into the cockpit so you can see that. But here, because we only see Unit 1 in this scene, we don't really know what Shinji is going through. Like, we imagine it, but we cannot see it, right? Like, is Shinji bargaining? Is he going through the 5 stages of grief in those 60 seconds, right? Like, is he in denial? Is he bargaining? Is he angry? Is he, like, shouting, or is he crying? We don't know. Like, we can come to our own conclusions, but we don't actually know. And in that moment, in those 60 seconds, Unit 1 and Shinji are not actually the same entities anymore. And I think that that's like a really impressive thing to pull off in the kind of overall zeitgeist of mecha anime.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. I think, I agree whether this was intentional or not. And I think it was intentional, at least, again, if you want to argue the length of it, maybe. But I do think this moment called for this pause, right? And I think it's a very effective moment. Kind of interesting. This probably isn't super important, but I did notice when they kind of cut after the fact, and they're kind of cutting away to like Unit 1 getting cleaned off. The blood in his hands was red. It was not angel blood.
Yes,
it is also because that's a reused shot.
That
but
too, but I'm just gonna.
I think that they have recolored.
They could have made it
past before.
Yes,
right?
that's true.
Like, with like Unit Zero's like berserk moments, so they really wanted to recolor that.
Yeah.
They could have, right? I mean,
yeah.
Yes. I mean, I don't know. Is the red blood in the Rebuild movies? Is that a question we should be asking? Or
well,
did they even get this? Does this even happen in the Rebuild movies?
Have you not seen 3.0?
We will. Look, I guess we'll save this for our inevitable Neon Genesis EvanGLORIO Rebuild podcast. So. Don't worry, that is an actual joke.
Don't worry,
unlike Legend of the Glory Heroes Gaiden, which is completely serious.
Yeah, I mean, obviously after this, we're doing King of Braves, EvanGLORIO.
All right, so we get one final scene for kind of the last time, I guess, with Shinji and Misato talking, and Shinji opening up his sort of guilt about having to kill Kaoru, and Misato basically coldly telling him, you did what you had to do. You had to kill the angel, whatever. And it
kind of... it's more than that. I think Misato is actually like really cold in this episode in a way that, like, I'm not going to say betrays the character, because I think that after what has happened to Misato in this show, this is believable. But like, the Misato of episode 1 would have never have said these things to Shinji, I think, right? Or maybe more accurately, the Misato of like episodes like 8 through 12, where she and Shinji have come to this kind of like mutual emotional understanding with each other. I don't think she would have said these kind of things. Like, she is like...
Right, like, the things she says are things that, like... the way I see this show anyway are things like, she's like, only those are things that have the will to live should survive. Like, he wished to die, so he doesn't deserve to survive. Like, the way I see it is Shinji also thinks those things about himself. So it's, like, really not a good thing to hear for him to hear right now.
Yeah. And I think, that's kind of what I mean, right? Is like, it's...
Like, you see, Kaoru deserves to die because he didn't want to live. It's like, well, Shinji doesn't want to live either, so...
Right. I think we'll save this for once we've talked about all 3 of these episodes, but... maybe it's not as strong of a drop from like Asuka's character, but I think in many ways this is a great like encapsulation of what has happened to Misato over this show, right? Like, and the why we needed those moments earlier in Evangelion with like happy music, Misato, because like it further makes the contrast more tragic to who she has become by the end of this show. Mm-hmm. Like, remember, like Misato's whole shtick is like, I joined like Nerve because like I hate my father and all this stuff, right? Like. And, like, I mean, we've never met her father, but since we've heard that her father is described as a Gendo-esque kind of figure, to hear Misato saying the kind of shit that, like, Gendo would be, like, right at home with, like, Gendo's philosophy is, like, in some ways very, like,
kind of hard
sad to
swallow.
Yeah.
I mean, you could also factor in she's, part of her driving force has always been her hatred of the angels, too, but I think...
But I think, like,
writing it off
earlier episodes,
writing it off of that would be not giving credit to the progression of her character, how she's been built.
Because I think that I agree that she's being driven purely by her hatred of angels at this point. But like, I feel like the second strongest like emotional like force in Misato's life was like her like love or care for Shinji, and like so to kind of seen that like aspect of her like completely evaporate in these episodes.
It's like that was like a positive step for her that is now seen to be reversed, right? So yeah, that concludes the last quote unquote real episode of the series.
We'll be able to get through 25 and 26 pretty quick. So
yeah, I do want to mention this now in the Platinum notes, because so let me just explain. When I've been referring to the Platinum notes, there's not like one big book of notes. There's like an individual booklet with each volume, right? So for the final volume, which is these 3 episodes, there's a foreword about the 2 endings that they feel like they needed to add in here to mention that, hey guys, we made End of Evangelion after this. And I'm only bringing it up now because it is in the Platinum notes, like for the TV series. But and I also want to give, I guess, these showmakers or whoever wrote their marketing material in the Platinum notes the opportunity to defend themselves before we get into episode 25 and 26. Sure. And I'm just going to read you verbatim the first paragraph here, because I'll just give it to you in their own words. It says, up to this point, Neon Genesis Evangelion has depicted themes surrounding the human heart and communication between people through the stories of the main characters. However, the climactic episodes, episode 25 and the final episode, reverse the relationship between the story and the theme. What would normally be considered the story is kept to a bare minimum, and the theme itself is told. The material is theoretical and experimental, and without a doubt, something never seen before in TV animation. When it originally aired, it became an incredibly hot topic and divided the fans in their opinion. So from there on, it goes to talk about, because of the fan outpouring, we decided to make End of Evangelion, which is a more literal depiction of what happens with a couple of other twists to make a second.
Also, they had no money.
Yes.
But yes, I just wanted to. I wanted to get the official spin on what happened here from the Gainax marketing, PR department, being as generous as they can before we enter into
that is, I'm glad to hear that opening statement.
I do like how, depending on whether you're watching the regular or the director's cut version of episode 24, they have a different next time on Ninja's Evangelion.
Yes, I was gonna bring that up as well. So if you are watching the original broadcast one, the preview, which I might add is now like key animation frames or something, but it's not like at this point or the storyboard.
Key frames. These are like fucking notebook sketches.
Notebooks. Something drawn on a napkin. So in the original air one, the preview is for this version of episode 25, whereas in the director's cut is the version of episode 25 in End of Evangelion that they preview.
25 Prime.
Interesting.
Yeah, so interesting point. So we'll have plenty more to say about End of Evangelion next podcast. For now, we got to talk about the TV ending. So let's go to episode 25. Do You Love Me? And like we kind of alluded to, I don't know how much we're going to actually have to say about the content about these episodes because there's not a lot going on.
So 25, aka the real second recap episode.
So
go ahead.
Here's my real problem with this episode. I think at the core of it is, so this episode, after hearing that Gainax explanation, makes sense. This episode is essentially a thematic outline of many of its primary characters, what drives them, what they fear, and eventually what breaks them, right? That is totally what this episode is. But as Iro said, in many ways, this is just a secret recap episode because now here's the thing, right? Yep. They talk about how, we want to talk about the themes instead of the story. Here's the problem. Do you know why themes are interesting in fiction? It's because they are maintained and sustained. Right. They are built by interesting stories. Anybody can come up with an interesting theme, right? Anybody can come up with a story the theme is war is bad. But can you actually make that an interesting theme through the framework of your storytelling? And the problem here is that episode 25...
bad without a loud robot.
Yes. The problem with 25, though, is even as a thematic outline of these characters, I don't think it reveals anything new about them. Everything about these characters are things we already know, right?
It's basically confirming in words everything that we've learned so far in case we did not figure it out.
It feels so unnecessary. Did you know, Rei has her internal reflection about her sense of selfhood. Did you know that Asuka's childhood fucking sucked? Like, did you know? Like, did you know what Misato's deal was? Like,
this episode, in a way, is the most anime of all the episodes of Evangelion.
Like,
in what way?
Like elaborate on that. I'm actually really curious what you mean by that.
The way that so much anime dialogue is saying straight out
redundant.
The things that were self-evident within the story.
Oh, totally. Yes. Like, that's the thing, right? I feel like Evangelion had such confidence in its storytelling and its character work, right? Like, this show had so much confidence in, like, look, you figure out what Asuka's deal is. Like even before things start to go bad, like, you already understand who Asuka is as a character. Like, you understand what drives her. And in many ways, like, even as far back as, like, Dance Like You Want to Win, you already understand her insecurities. You get them. They make sense. So, like, to be like, and hell, Asuka's backstory episode was like 2 episodes ago. Like, like, this is literally just like recapping information we already learned not that long ago. And that's for all the characters. Same with Rei. Same with Misato. Does Ritsuko get any bit in this episode? I don't remember.
She does, I think.
Then same with Ritsuko. Like these 4 like primary female characters who, like, I think have all had varying degrees of, like, good characterization. It's just, like, reiterating them for us, which, like, without any, like, new insight into it.
Yeah.
There are a few, like, frames here and there in this episode.
So let's get into the episode. I think what I was getting at is there are a few snippets of, reality to kind of give us hints that something has gone down. But the vast majority of it is people talking in Shinji's head, right?
Yep. Yes. Folding chair with the spotlight.
Yes.
Now I, having come back to this episode after many years, now I realize where Xenogears got it from.
A good deal of the episode is people sitting in folding chairs and getting yelled at by the other characters. Starting with Shinji sitting in this folding chair with Rei calling him out for, why did you kill Karu? He goes through a whole spiel about, I had to do it, but it ultimately comes down to, the same stuff we've been talking about with Shinji, him, wanting to please other people and get praise from other people, and that ultimately being his reason for piloting the Evangelion. We kind of asked that question, which, again, we answered kind of a long time ago. And we rotate everybody in and out here. So we get Asuka in the chair for a bit. Rei calls her out, who we do get one shot of what I'm assuming is real life with her floating underwater somewhere.
Yeah.
With no other context. But, we kind of touch back on why does Asuka pilot the Eva, for herself. And again, I guess in similar roundabout way to Shinji getting praise from other people. We get Rei calling out herself. We get
the famous, like, creepy Rei face.
Oh yeah,
which cute. Just makes me laugh.
The creepy Rei.
Yeah, we get Rei calling out herself with, I guess it's Rei 2 in the chair, who's the one. Like, I guess Rei 2 is kind of boring, but Rei 1 and Rei 3 are, like, terrible people.
Yeah, I mean, if you want your evidence that, like, clones are not predetermined personalities, but they can in fact diverge depending on their environmental factors. It's not a strong disparity, but yes, the difference between the 3 Reis is
Rei 2's retreading her thing about I am a person, my own person, and all that, and they're like, nah, we're all clones, and you just do what Gendo tells you. And so after kind of recapping everybody's insecurities, don't they just flash on the screen, and so instrumentality starts.
Something like this.
Oh wait, they do show while Ray's in the chair.
It says, you were made for this day.
Yeah, while Ray's in the chair, Gendo shows up and says, right, you were made for this day or whatever. And that's when they're like, and so instrumentality begins, because we said so, whatever that means. We do catch, again, some glimpses of Ritsuko and Masato's bodies. They appear to have been shot or something.
Yes.
Again, with no context. But
don't worry, all souls will become one, and we'll find eternal peace.
Right, like Gendo kind of has a line here that we are not returning mankind not to nothingness, but instead to our original state, which kind of I guess leads to like the talk, the world building bullshittery in episode 24 of like mankind is derived from. I thought it was Adam, maybe it's Lilith. I'm not sure anymore. But
mankind is from the Lilith and the angels are from Adam, I think is the way it's supposed to go. But this is not really that important.
This is kind of a confirmation that instrumentality is somehow making all of mankind a single being.
Yes. Which I mean, I feel like in 2019, you know what instrumentality means because that's become the catchword for the evil plan where we unite everybody as one, right?
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah, Evangelion is very influential.
Yeah. which G that I'm going to warn you now. I don't want you to answer this question right now. I'm saving it for the last episode. So preview, everybody. Stay tuned.
All right.
I am going to ask you, what did you know and what didn't you know at the very end? So just
I will be happy to get into that.
Give some thought to that for the final part of next episode. But yes. But I think instrumentality, again, if you watch anime and it's 2019, you know what instrumentality was because that has become the term for this thing, right?
Yes.
But so even though we saw, at least physically, it appeared that Ritsuko and Masato are dead, we see it's Masato's turn in the chair. Again, we go through all of her same insecurities about her dad and Kaji, and she does mention here that everybody, it appears everybody can see everything that she's thinking, and she's freaking out because that's how instrumentality works, I guess. So we kind of get that hint there. Asuka ends up back in the chair. We do learn a little bit about the truth about Asuka's stepmom, which I don't think was clear earlier.
Okay.
That was because Iro, you mentioned, which I don't know if G and I actually caught on the one bit where her dad was talking to some other doctor or something like that.
Right.
And then they revealed that the other doctor ended up being her stepmom. I think that's what they were implying.
Oh, is that what? Okay.
That's the way I read that. Does that
banging the other doctor on the side?
Right. And I think they implied that that's who ended up being her stepmom.
I think so.
So
I see. Huh.
Kind of rubbing more salt in the wound for poor Asuka, I guess. But, I did find it interesting in this scene and also in her episode. Like they even had like Asuka like sound different almost. Like it almost sounds like a different voice when she's talking, like when she's being honest and not like putting on the whole like show that she normally puts on. So we kind of get more of that, which again is odd considering that was literally 2 episodes ago. But
Yep.
And we loop back around to Shinji, who they basically say that, oh, well, this is what you chose to do, Shinji, or something like that, which I think is going to bleed into episode 26. But yeah, I mean, like we said, there's not really much to say about the content because there's not much to see because they're rehashing a lot of animation or not animating anything at all. And then B, thematically, we knew all this stuff already. This is almost more of a recap episode than the Weaving a Story 2 or whatever. So,
yeah.
Well, so I will say, like, in my memories of the show, like, I know it's 25 and 26, that's this stuff, but what was actually in my memory was only part of episode 26. Like, 25, just in one ear out the other for episode 25.
I would definitely agree with that sentiment. I think that like people tend to pair 25 and 26 together, but I think that like realistically 26 is the only one that actually matters. I feel like I just said earlier that I don't think any part of Evangelion is redundant, but 25 might actually be the closest this show has ever gotten to like what I think is an entirely like redundant episode. Yes, like unless like you fucking somehow made it to episode 25 still not understanding the like thematic like elements of each character's personality in this show, like I don't see what this episode actually like reveals about the world or the story, which I guess based on what Gynax wrote those platinum notes is just as planned. Question mark?
All according to Keikaku.
Yeah.
And the next episode previews have devolved fully into
just a script, dog. It ain't even drawings, man. Like this is how fucking bad it's got. Like, like man, like
it's fascinating.
It is. You know, like I don't know. Maybe this is not that important, so I'm just gonna bring it up now. Like watching this last episode kind of reminded me of like when everybody was like, you know, there was that like not kerfuffle, but there was that like minor like thing on the internet that blew a bit when like Trigger was like, hey, like lend us your power. We are finishing the last episode of Kill the Kill. We have like 12 hours left.
Yes.
You know, there was very much this vibe of like, oh god, like what is the last episode going to be? Like, yeah, like, oh god, like they're literally like rushing the tape to like the broadcast station at like fucking, you know, an hour before it airs or something.
Right.
And like, at the end of the day, that last episode turned out pretty great. Everybody was happy. It was a feel-good story for everyone. This last episode, I'm like,
maybe not so much.
Like, was Tsurumaki fucking like drawing like fucking boards on a like a sketchbook in the back of a car on the way to like the broadcast station? Like that is the fucking vibe I get from this last episode. Like fucking Ano's on the phone trying to like stall for time, and like Tsurumaki and Yoshinari are like, shit, we're the markers. You know, like,
and this actually has more animation in it than 25.
Oh, it
Not
does.
much,
it totally does. But like,
yeah, it does give you the vibe of like they were really cutting it close on this one. All right, so let's talk about the last episode, 26. Take care of yourself. Yeah. We get a big reminder, you know, I think they had like an instrumentality continues or whatever.
That's right.
In case we forgot. And
it continues, and now it's Shinji's turn, as I think how it starts off.
Right.
Something along those lines.
So now we're going to do a real deep dive on Shinji to wrap this thing up. Where we're going through all his insecurities.
Okay, there's literally a frame here that's like, after it's like, instrumentality's begun, we don't have time to show you everything, so let's look at Shinji.
Yeah. And they start, man, this was just kind of sad. They start sprinkling in like artsy black and white photos of random objects.
It is truly like Gynax at its the most desperate I have ever seen them.
This actually totally feels like a Bakemonogatari move, to be honest. Like, yeah, but like same energy of we've burned all our money on hookers and blow, and we have to fill this space somehow.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. Like, I mean, we'll get to this after we talk about this episode, but like it is definitely scenes like these that have me talking about the intentionality of Evangelion, right? Like there are probably people out there who have written essays about oh man, Ano's bold creative choice to use black and white photos in this scene.
Here he chose
motherfucker, this is because he got no money anymore. Like
here he chose to show a picture about this. Hirisho chose to show a photo of a mailbox because Shinji is trying to reach out and communicate with with other people, but you know there's a barrier in the way that he has to. I don't know, man.
Motherfucker, I guarantee you, there's a podcast or an essay out there that has said
I'm sure
that exact same shit word for word.
I'm sure somebody.
There is an essay that has analyzed every single black and white photo in that montage.
I think my favorite, like, still frames are just earlier frames from the show, but with, like, fake manga screen tone over them.
Oh my god, right, with the fucking screen tones?
Yes. Oh, they pull out every camera filter in the book.
Every fucking cheap trick imaginable. Man.
In this one, over some of the screenshots of, like, Shinji's face and stuff like that.
Just pixelizing loops and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of get sprinkled in here some more of Asuka's stuff, and they kind of merge it with Shinji, and they both reach the same conclusion that their entire purpose in life has been tied to piloting the Evangelion. So maybe they aren't all that different to begin with. And it's at this point we start resorting to marker sketches.
Oh yeah, here we go.
I actually like these because it's better than what they were doing last episode. Like,
yeah, no, I do agree. We joke
happening.
There is like there is a handmade quality to them, right? There is a rough like human feel to them that like obviously is because of production issues, but taken as is still an interesting creative choice.
You know what? You know what?
I just also love hand drawn stuff.
Yeah, like I like the art, but like you kind of it's almost kind of sad at this point.
Yeah, no, totally.
It kind of made me think of, and this would not have made sense in 1995, but in 2019, it made me think of like if somebody uploaded a like anime drama CD to YouTube and needed to put some like still images in to keep it interesting.
Oh man!
Oh no, I totally understand.
Like you know what I'm saying with that, like
yeah,
that's what a good portion of, particularly the marker sketches.
I will say there's one quick line, or I think it's on text or whatever, where I was just like, "Oh, this is the big mood of Evangelion." The question is, "Do you love your mom?" And I was like, I was just like, "Oh, yep, big mood." This is just if you needed like a fucking like 5-word like encapsulation of like fucking Evangelion's whole brand of bullshit, here you go.
Yeah. What about her 2-hit multi-target attacks?
Oh yeah. Do you love your mom and her Lance of Longinus? Do you love your mom and her cool ass progressive knife?
Oh,
do you love your mom even when she becomes Zabisto?
Do you love your mom and her positron rifle that uses all of the electricity in Japan?
Yes, do you love your mom and her S2 engine?
that last one just sounds filthy, but
love her mom and her AT field.
Did we ever actually talk about what the S2 engine is?
It's a super solenoid, something or other.
I still don't fucking know what the S2 engine actually is. I understand what it is thematically in story, but...
Actually, did they ever even say it in the show, now that I'm thinking about it?
It's just a thing that's in the Angels.
Well,
whatever.
It gives
unlimited energy source.
It's an unlimited energy source.
It's Metal Gear Rising. It's Zandatsu. It's you. Right. You rip out the spine to get the juice.
Yeah, drink the juice.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
Anyway, I don't even remember what was happening. We had marker sketches. At some point, they come to the conclusion where they start to try to move this in a positive direction. That because the world around Shinji keeps changing, he needs to take care of himself, and this plants him in the world of nothing, which basically turns this into that.
I do like this sequence.
That one Bugs Bunny cartoon where the guy's like drawing stuff on the blank page while Bugs Bunny's walking around.
Yeah. Yes.
That's basically what happens here.
It's a neat bit of animation. It's actually really well animated. Like this one bit here for like about 20 seconds or maybe even less.
Yeah, because we have Shinji basically walking around on a white screen, and then he's like, I don't know what to do, so like, here, let me give you some land, and then somebody draws a line, suddenly has land, and then there's like some random bit where just like this really well animated morphing object that clearly had Yoshinari involved. The platinum note said it was Anno and Yoshinari did that part.
Oh yeah, that
tracks.
Which you can definitely.
Like I said, was Yoshinari drawing that in the car on the way to the station?
Yeah, he's literally filling the coloring on that in the back of the car. Yeah. So we kind of have that as
to teach Shinji that reality is relative or something,
right?
Or it can change the world based on how he chooses to perceive it.
There's this whole vibe of this part here as we get close to the end of like life and the world is what you make of it. Like whether you decide that is truth to you or not is up to you. And so, what better way to communicate that theme than a school AU spinoff?
Yes. So we go from the world of nothing, where Shinji then gets dumped into the harem anime he deserves, complete with Asuka as his childhood friend waking him up in the morning and making a morning wood joke.
I do like his Unit 01 backpack.
Yes, it's a very good AU interpretation.
Oh yeah, totally. Yes.
Didn't they make a whole spin-off manga about this?
Yes.
Probably.
Dude,
yeah.
Dude, not just one. I am sure like 50 of those exist.
I did want to point out because we have a shot of Gendo and Yui as Shinji's happy parents in this world, and
yes, and
Gendo's newspaper mentions clearly, Second Impact did not happen in this world, and the African American female president is going to visit the South Pole or something like that, which I guess maybe they're trying to say, wow, how unlikely is that? But
I mean, yeah, there's definitely a vibe like, oh, what a crazy alternate universe. But
yeah. But yeah, they go through the whole thing. Ray is running with the toast. We got to fix
that. Oh man, this fucking alternate universe Ray is great. Just seeing fucking Ray of all characters running with the toast
arguably
in her
the
mouth.
best animated thing in the entire series as far as frames per second.
I think my favorite shot in this is we get the same outside of the apartment complex shot that we've got the whole show. Yeah. But every other balcony has people living in those apartments.
Yeah, there are signs of actually people living there, which is like a subtle but very good like way of communicating the otherness of this universe.
Right. So they play along with the school thing. Ray's the new transfer student.
And Shinji saw her panties.
Of course.
And as if Shinji had not seen her naked like fucking 20 episodes ago.
They still managed to recycle the bit with Masato showing up to school.
Yeah, they started reusing some footage as soon as they get to the school. Like, you can tell they're just like fucking recycling some like Toji and Kensuke footage.
Yeah, I think that's
dubbed over with new lines.
I think the Masato one's the most like shameless. But and they're clearly like
now she's their hot teacher,
right?
Instead of just showing up for parent teacher conferences.
So they managed.
Old man who can't stop talking about Second Impact is not here anymore.
Oh man, the old man got fired for talking too much about Second Impact.
They managed to animate a good like 3 minutes of the episode until we start falling apart again here.
Oh, I love this. Like they couldn't even keep up this bit. Even with despite all of their best efforts, you could tell they were like pouring their lives into this dumbass 2-3 minute bit.
Yes.
And they couldn't even sustain it for that long.
They couldn't even finish this one off because before you know it, we're back to the marker sketches of the kids in class. And then they kind of this is like and I think you could say a lot about this. It's both kind of sad and brilliant. Like I don't think it makes for a good episode, but like you almost have to
the ways they made it, they worked with what they had are
it's really were as dire as they appear to be. This in particular, I like how they framed it as okay. We have this fully animated school thing, and it's almost like it was fading out back to the
right.
Yeah. I mean, no, totally. Like narratively, it makes a ton of sense.
Right.
It's just.
Yeah,
it's just that when you know about the realities of how this show was made, like it becomes less of an interesting creative choice and more like a last-ditch move of desperation.
Right.
Oh, but that's more interesting than a creative choice to me.
Yeah, I'm not denying that. Like I said, the thing I will keep saying about Evangelion that I will say once we get into our like final thoughts is like deeply fascinating show. I don't know if I could ever call Evangelion like genuinely like great, but it is unbelievably interesting.
Yeah, so you have your full animated school scene, which then goes to the marker boards, and then finally they just cut to the script. It's like, haha, this is just an anime, but this is one of many possibilities.
And we zoom out to like Shinji reading that script.
Right.
Like he's holding it.
Yeah, they actually show him holding that, right. So, but, this is one of many possibilities, kind of looping back around to things, always changing, life being what you make it, all that stuff. And, they finally kind of arrive on Shinji hitting an epiphany where, maybe everybody doesn't hate me. Maybe I'm just me and that's okay. Kind of to quote Ikuhara again earlier, I'm me, nothing more, nothing less. And that leads to our final moment. The glass breaks and it's time to...
You figured it out, Shinji. Congratulations.
Congratulate Shinji. With all his friends and family clapping and standing on what appears to be a desolate planet Earth.
Well, look, like I said before, when they were talking about how, the world is what you perceive, and, you make that reality your own. Then if that's what Shinji wants, then I guess that's what Shinji gets.
Yes. And that
is a desolate planet where 9 people stand in a circle around him and clap for him.
And also Pen.
Yeah, Pen's there too. So you know what? Maybe it's not all bad.
He really did go to a better place. Yeah, and that concludes Neon Genesis Evangelion, the television series.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, guys. We made it. Well, not quite. So, I'm sure we all have some thoughts to share. I wanted to loop back around to a couple of discussions that we said we would talk about when we hit the end. And I think some things we can get into here, some things we'll save for the true ending next episode. But I do think this is the best time to talk about the thing we keep talking about with what was intentional and what was, oh God, I'm drawing this in the back of the car on the way to the station. And probably the more important question of how has that impacted people's perception of the show, right? Because that was really the heart of what you've been asking, G, right? So
yes,
I do want to say, just to start, I don't think there's any way in hell you can argue that these episodes came out the way exactly that Anna wanted them, right? Like, totally, can we all agree? I hope we can all agree on that much at least, right?
Oh yes, I mean, I think as far back as even episode maybe 22 or 23, I think that what Evangelion becomes by the end is some desperate remaneuvering on Gainax's part. I think that, but yes, especially 25 and 26, and I think that this is the part where I definitely I think I come into conflict with much of the Evangelion discourse. Is of course, I want to analyze the work as it is presented, as what was given to us, but I sometimes think that, because of the nature of fandom, because the nature of fandom is consuming, right? The nature of fans is to consume. And there is this, constant, undertone in, the Evangelion discourse of, oh, we need to, grasp meaning from every single thing that happened in this show. Everything, oh no, not these things in this show can't just be because of an accident or because of restrictions on our budget or because we ran out of time. No. Everything here must have been intentional. Everything here must be analyzed. Everything here must be taken as part of some kind of greater meaning. And I think that is what leads to the very straw man version of the Evangelion discourse that is just navel gazing way too hard. But it's a tough thing because I feel also, conversely, we should talk about Evangelion as the version that we have seen. And, I imagine that many of the choices they made, for example, the shot of Unit 1 holding Kaworu, were likely very intentional. Those things were probably in there from, maybe, if not the very beginning of the show, then, were intended very early on. And I guess it's, trying to figure out that balance that has continued to kind of confound me.
Iro, what do you think?
I don't know how, so much of it we can't tell whether it was what the balance is, right, between that intentionality and how much they were scrambling to pad for time or do whatever. And that is what I find interesting. It's crazy to me when people are, like G said, certain people take everything in the show as if it was definitely intentional.
Right. They want to say this is the work of the genius Anno, and this is all his master plan, and not that, hey, this was made by humans that were in a tight spot and they did the best they could with what they had. But
right. I'm sure there is intentionality to Shinji holding Kaworu for 60 seconds straight. But also, surely it's how it is because they were also fighting for time, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the thing. These creative choices can serve multiple intentions, and
right.
That is, as you said, Iro, that is the interesting thing about media. That is the interesting thing about fiction, is that because these are not bespoke creations, made in a void. They are made and built by people, and as a result, it is often even more interesting when you see the traces of those people in the work.
And I personally just love stuff from all kinds of media where it's like, we did this certain way because it allowed us to cut this corner, this corner, and this corner, while still like maintaining like a certain amount of creative vision. Like that stuff is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's like you have to admire what they did with it. Like we keep saying, like it's impressive in that regard, but it makes you wonder what could have been, I guess.
And that is why I often bring up this is why I often discuss or why I am curious about the rebuild movies, despite their controversial kind of reputation, is how much of and I guess turns out not much because now those things have become something completely different. But how much of End of Evangelion and maybe even the rebuild movies is Anno's attempt at a do-over, if that makes sense, right? How much of this is Anno being no, I didn't tell it right the first time around. I need to fix it. And because here's the thing, as an artist, I can tell you this is a very natural inclination for creative people.
Yes.
This desire of, nothing is ever quite done. I can fix it a little bit more. If you give me another hour, another day, another week, another month, another year, I can make it better. And one of the hardest things for an artist to learn is eventually how to let go, how to say, you know what, this is done. It's not done to me, but it is done. And I don't know, it makes me wonder, because look, let's be real, dog. It's 2019 and Anno's still doing Evangelion shit.
Yeah.
Imagine all the other great things Anno could have created, because let's be real, that dude is a very talented director. How many other interesting works would he have created if he had not spent the last 2 decades of his life pursuing this bizarre white whale of whatever he considers to be his perfect interpretation of that story.
Yeah. So I will say this. I think when we watch End of Evangelion, that is a clear response to this. I don't think there's any question on that. After,
I guess, in my
after watching End of Evangelion, I have had zero desire to watch the new movies because I don't feel like it's necessary. So,
right. So that's you don't feel it's
right.
necessary, but why does
Anno feel it's necessary? Right. So that's the interesting
question. What is incomplete? What is incomplete to him?
Because I guess my point was I could see wanting to revisit after this, but after End of Evangelion, I do not feel like it was necessary. So
right. So to in your opinion, then you believe, and we'll speak about this when I've actually watched it. But in your opinion, you believe that End of Evangelion was Anno's Anno was able to address
I feel
he was able to quote unquote finish Evangelion.
I feel like it was a satisfactory conclusion to the story.
I think the supposed do-over of fixing the ending is definitely what End of Evangelion is meant to be.
I guess, and then
because there has been the foreshadowing and plot stuff
sure, totally.
The lead up towards that has been in the show.
Yes, and I guess that's why that confounds me about the rebuild movies. I mean, beyond just the cynical answer of money, what is the motivation then for the rebuild movies? Why does Anno? I guess that's the thing. That's the thing that confuses me about this work, because there are many things about this work that I feel like the fans accept as kind of sacrosanct. The things that these are these are the most important things about this show that can never be changed, can never be touched. And why have the fans come to that interpretation, whereas Anno has seemingly come to his own conclusion about the seeming incompleteness of the Evangelion story?
Yeah, I don't know.
And I'm not expecting that you guys have answers to that. I'm sorry that I left that in the air as a question, but I don't think you guys have answers. It's just that is what that is the thing that drives me to ask these questions, I guess, about
it's an interesting question, but like I said, I feel like at the end of this, I could see why you would want to go back for it. The official, totally. We read in the official marketing material, this was being generous here, a controversial ending at the time. I mean, if you could imagine, watching it, if you were watching it then week to week on TV, how you would have felt.
Dude, this would.
I have the supposed report from Anime Expo 1996. It says, It says here, at the expo, many of the fans asked Mr. Ano about episodes 25 and 26. He said, I don't have a problem about the way it ended. If there's a problem, it's with you guys. Then he grabbed the mic and said, in English, too bad.
So I got the impression, between that and other things I've read, I got the impression that at that time, like immediately after the series ended and, Ano was getting death threats and stuff like that, I think he lashed back out and was just like, I'm done with this. And then that's why, it's like a year or two later that we get to Evangelion. But
I mean, look, that's just Ano taking after the Grand Master of persnickety mecha auteurs, Yoshiyuki Tomino himself. So, that is just
I guess,
classic response.
I mean, because I could also see how, you worked, because like I don't feel like when you watch these 25 and 26, it's not like you get the impression that they were being like lazy or whatever. Like they probably busted their asses to get them out, right? And then like to have everybody just be like, "Wow, this is terrible," or send you death threats or whatever. I could see how you might want to just say,
step off.
So
right, no, totally. I definitely. I guess I definitely 100% agree with that. I guess. It's definitely a thing of like, but at the same time, like I cannot like get away from the fact that like,
in Ano's heart, though,
having not watched, like Ano's actions have not reflected that sentiment.
Right.
Like if Ano was truly like, I'm fucking done with it, I'm never touching this shit ever again, I feel like
he might have been that like 2 months after the show aired versus a year later.
I mean, again, you compare that to Tomino, who said, "Fuck it, I'm never doing the UC ever again," and guess what? He never touched the Universal Century of Gundam ever again. Like
asterisk.
Well, with like 5 asterisks, but you know what I mean. Like, like thematically, they are so different from like his past works that like that has to feel intentional. Whereas with Ano, it's like, dog, you keep going back to the Ava well like over and over again. Like,
yeah, I mean, I do. So I remember. I don't know if you guys remember when the first Rebirth movie was happening, because I think.
I hadn't seen Evangelion at that point.
It was like around. I think it started as like the 10th anniversary project, so it would have been around 2005-ish. And I remember Ano saying something to the effect of, the kids these days are forgetting what Evangelion was and everything, and that was. And to me, I don't know.
Ano of all people going, the kids don't get Evangelion anymore.
So. And that may have just been PR talk or whatever, so who knows what the real motivation was. But I remember that happening, and I remember him saying he didn't really want to be involved in it, and that's why he's had Tsurumaki really being the lead on them, right? Or at least at the time. I don't know how things have changed in the past.
And what a surprise! Rebuild 1 was a technically competent recreation of the early parts of the movies, and Rebuild 2 and 3 go off the fucking
so I don't know what happened after that, but I think that's where we started, and then we're 15 years later almost, right? And they're just barely scraping through the finish line here.
Motherfucker, they will look. You want to know the fucking truth? They'll have worked on fucking 4.0 for longer than Madhouse worked on Redline.
Better look good.
And you know what? That movie better look fucking amazing, because Redline was worth the 7-year wait.
Yeah.
I pray to God for the Ava fans out there that 4.0 even remotely manages to live up to your expectations.
I saw that preview footage. They stabbed an angel with the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, I saw that trailer. Unit 2 looks like fucking shit in that trailer. Yeah. So
all right.
God, I can't even remember what the actual designation is because it's so dumb.
Right, I know that's not even Unit 2. I know there's somebody out there that like, actually, the version you see in that trailer is actually Unit 2 fucking the Gamma Rebirth version or some shit. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Just fucking what? Fucking.
I do like Pirate Asuka.
It's like Ano created Evangelion, which is like, look. We're getting long in this podcast, so I don't want to get into my whole, fuck the people who say Evangelion is the only worthwhile mecha anime, that Evangelion comes in a long line of, mecha anime and draws from them. I've said that multiple times. So but despite that, I will still admit that I think the original Evangelion does some, really cool, unique things. And then I look at those fucking Rebuild movies, and I'm like, motherfucker, you're making the same mistakes everybody else in this genre does. You're introducing like 50 variants of the unit, like the Ava units to sell figures and shit. And it's
let it go. Let it go.
Like, yeah, let it go, my guy. But should we are going long, but should we get to the one last thing we did want to talk about? Just about like the
and I do want to just get a few other parting words on just wrapping up the TV show. But yes, as far as the other kind of thing we've talked about is, the first half and the second half of Evangelion is very different. And you do get some people who are very much into the second half and feel like, oh, well, the stuff with the monster of the week and the fun hijinks in the beginning are not, you could just do away with those and you'd be fine.
Right. Like I have totally read the takes from like, and I don't even mean straw man takes. I mean takes from like people who are like otherwise like fairly intelligent people say Evangelion would be better if it was 13 episodes. Like I've totally seen that take before.
The reason it's good is because it has both of those things. It has all of those things.
Yes, here's the thing. We say we're gonna have a discussion, but I think all three of us are kind of in agreement here that like, I think in many ways, like, despite what I said literally earlier in this podcast, I don't think I could ever call Evangelion a truly like great or perfect work. I do think that like it does some very good things, and one of those things is the way it like so fully encapsulates like both aspects, like both sides of its kind of personality and its identity. Like we have said multiple times now that like the reason why many of the characters like eventual developments at the end of Evangelion is because of the contrast between their earlier selves. Like there are people out there who say, man, fuck that dancing episode, who needs that? And I'm like, motherfucker, that dancing episode is like maybe the most important like episode to find Asuka's character. Like that is maybe the single most important episode to like explain who she is as a person and to contrast what she becomes later in the show. And the idea of, we don't need this shit. Like fuck you. Like get out of here with that bad take.
Maybe take out the first half, episode 25 would have a purpose.
Yes. If Dance Like You Want to Win didn't exist, maybe 25 would be a little bit less redundant.
Yeah. So to that point, I wanted to mention, so a couple of things kind of came back to me as I was watching this and memories of my first time going through it. One of them was, I remember pitching to my friends to get them to watch it because I absolutely loved it when I first watched it. And even watching the TV show again, I think it all held up very well to my memory, except for the last two episodes, which I think the first time I watched it, and in subsequent watches, I always kind of watched them all within 2 or 3 days or whatever, like in a quick time period. And I think I was still high on the Kool-Aid, whatever you want to say. But,
I mean, no, I get it. Like if
and I was like, oh man, I totally get it. And then I realized. And then I realized and it kind of the same thing with Iro. Like the only thing I actually remember are the little like school bits and stuff in like the last episode. I don't even remember but I remember at the time thinking, oh, how cool that they went this direction or whatever, and not knowing any of the context. Like I liked the concept of I liked the idea of doing something less literal and like splashing in, like in 25 when we get splashed in some of like the hints of what really happened and kind of like making your brain piece it together. I don't think it's done particularly well in this case, but I like
we only knew that because we've seen End of Evangelion, right?
Right. So when I watched it before I watched End of Evangelion, I'm like trying to figure out what happened and stuff like that. So I don't think it was done particularly well, but I like that idea and the idea of changing I guess the presentation, and just to throw in my take on was it intentional or not. I think if Anno had his way, it probably would have been some combination of what we get in End of Evangelion and what we got here. I still think he would have gone for some of the more like artsy shots.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm not trying.
Spoilers, but some of that stuff is still in End of Evangelion.
Yes. Believe me, when I talk about Anno's intentionality, I am not trying to imply, if Anno had the money, Evangelion would have ended like Gurren Lagann.
Right.
I'm definitely not like implying that. But I think it would have still been.
Would we have gotten all those marker drawings and black and white photographs and camera filters and recycled animation? No.
Right. So I think we've got a
So,
lot less of that.
Yes.
You know, and
but yeah, so sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but my point was when I remember after I had watched it originally, and I was trying to convince my friends to watch it, I was explaining to them how one of my favorite things was that the first half builds up this, like, I think I call it a false sense of security of
That's certainly a way to put it. Yeah,
of both for the characters and you thinking you understand what the show is. And because I knew virtually nothing. This was pre-internet days, so like I knew that a lot of people were talking. Well, it was like the very, very, very early internet days, so it's not like I could just like find synopsises of the show or something like that.
Right.
So I kept hearing that the show was great and that some people are saying it's the greatest anime of all time, but other than that, I didn't know anything about it. So I was coming in pretty cold, and I thought it was very cool how the first half kind of makes you think it's one thing. It's, maybe that's not the right way to way I want to put it, but it builds it up in a certain way that your expectations are in a certain place, and then it kind of goes in a different direction. But to your point, G, the reason why that's so good is because the two blend together. You have to have one for the other one.
Yeah, and I think it's not just that, but it's like, I don't think you could. I don't know how anyone could ever see the first half of Evangelion as like redundant when it is like technically so well accomplished. Like there, like I guess for me it's like when both halves of that show's personality are so well done. Like I think that shows like how important both of them were to like the overall image of what that anime is.
Right.
Like it's just like it's like when you guys remember like what I was saying in the first few podcasts of this thing was like I could feel the care that was put into this show, like the amount of thought that went into it. Like this was a deeply like thoughtful show in a variety of ways, from its characters to its like aesthetic design, to its set design and its like animation. And I think that like if those parts were meant to be like a gotcha, like a trick, I don't think they would have like I don't think that would have ever like they would not have put that amount of care into it. Like I've totally seen the people who are like, oh, I mean, this gets into some really like fucking up your own ass postmodern irony shit, but I've totally seen people say, oh, like the first half of Evangelion is animated super well to trick you into thinking it's going to be a mecha anime, and then the back half is shit on purpose. And I'm like, I think Otto would have made that look better if he could afford to.
Yeah, that's just ignorant. But or
it's more, or it's even just like if you want to, like, I guess it's like I've certainly seen the argument that like, oh, like I mean, yes, just in general that argument of like of lulling you into a sense of false security, but I think it's just like Evangelion is the entire package, right? Like,
right. There's rhetoric that like you're just waiting for the true Evangelion to begin.
Right. Yes. That's a perfect way of putting it.
When it actually was there the whole time.
Right. Like, yes, there have definitely been people who are like, oh, episode 17's here, the real,
it was a 3-course meal.
Right. Yeah. Like, and I think it's because like those character arcs are so like well done over the course of the entire 26 episodes. Like, like as much as I give Shinji shit, and I still will stand by my stance that I don't particularly like Shinji as a character. I think he is a deeply compelling one. I think his arc, like, as like, sure, his character development is not drastic in the way that like Simone from like Gurren Lagann goes, but like Shinji's character arc is pronounced. It is there. Like you do see him change and grow as a person, and like that can only happen when you are there for the whole ride. Same thing with like we said, Asuka or Misato. Like their stories become so deeply tragic because of where they start, and like because that start is well done. Like I think there are some like lesser worse media out there like I think bad media and bad stories have often done this trick of like introducing a character purely for the narrative purpose of tearing them down. And I think that oftentimes you can already feel that in their character. Right. Like, you can tell from the moment they're introduced, oh, this character just exists to eat shit. Like, and it makes that fall from grace less compelling, because narratively in your brain, your meta brain that is like familiar with like, you know, what fiction is, has already recognized, oh, this is not a character meant to be emotionally invested in, because they're gonna like die or lose or, you know, become evil or whatever, like in like 2 episodes. But like, that doesn't happen to Asuka. Like, Asuka's fall is like this grinding car crash, you know, like from start to finish.
Right. It's not like they just flip a switch and she's now, you know, completely, you know, comatose in the hospital. Like, there's a process. They put in the work. It's like when we talked about like a couple episodes ago when I was talking about comparing this to, you know, Pretenders to the Throne. They don't put in the work. They rely on what, you know, happens in anime, like the tropes and stereotypical things.
They rely on
the set dressing and you know, just and they don't put in the work to properly build stuff up. They're just like, here's this character, they're going to be tragic, and you're going to be sad about it because we said so. And they don't. And it's hard to explain, because I mean, if it were easy to explain, then everybody could just do it, right? Like, it takes a good writer,
right,
and you know, good creators to make that happen. So, but there's a certain
media doesn't work as well when you can see their marionette strings on you. You know,
yeah.
Right. So
that is a good way to put it, Iro.
All right. Yeah. So I think maybe one more thing I want to say about my experience. Actually, you know what? I do want to just touch on, so with me and Iro rewatching. Iro, how are you feeling on rewatching the TV show compared to like the last time you watched it?
I mean, it's kind of it's mostly how I remember it. Like, I'm catching more details now than before, but like on the emotional level, like, yep, that's what the show, how I remember it being.
Did you think episode 25 and 26 were bad or did you try to justify it like I did back then?
The thing is, you watched it way earlier than I did. You know, like, by the time I watched the show,
yeah, I think I had watched it when everyone was still under the spell, right? But
right.
Right. I mean, I think that is an undeniable aspect of media, right? Is in many ways when you watched it. You know, like, I think that for better or worse, Jel, you, Iro, you, and me are all going to, for some way or another, have like what are intrinsically disparate experiences with this show because of just when we came to it, both age-wise and zeitgeist-wise.
Yeah, it's right. We've watched them in. There's like nothing. Like, you said before, you try to watch without context, but nothing. You can't see anything without context. Nothing's in a vacuum. So
it's impossible.
And the time period you watch, or what age you are, what point in your life you are, is going to affect how you feel about it, right? But yeah. I think I will conclude with this one more thing. I was thinking that I remembered watching the final couple episodes. If you remember when we started, I talked about in the first couple episodes how I felt like I was much more sympathetic toward Shinji now watching the show. And I realized as we were getting toward the end, that wasn't necessarily true. I actually was pretty cool with Shinji by the end of the TV series, and Asuka too. And it was end of Evangelion, which, being the last thing I watched, made me not like Shinji at the time. That cemented my opinion at the time.
I mean, I've heard some things about Shinji's characterization.
I kind of forgot that's what swung me and kind of diverged the two, where I also love Asuka, but my opinion on Shinji went downhill after that. So I'm going to put that as our teaser for next episode.
Sure.
Everybody knows already.
But yeah, I'll just pretend I don't know anything. But, Boy, I sure am curious to see what happens to Shinji in
yes.
End of Evangelion.
So, yes, me teasing us talking about a 20-plus-year-old movie, but yeah, that will be our next episode, and that's going to be the final one. Well, we're going to talk about that. So I think we were talking about doubling it up because it's probably going to be long. We're going to do End of Evangelion in the first part.
Yeah.
And then we'll either take a break or we'll probably have to record another day because I'm doing these after work. So we're gonna combine it into one big episode on the stream. So the first.
So I hope you like listening to a 4-hour podcast.
I don't know if it's going to go that long, but it's probably famous last words, right? But so first part will.
I feel like I naively say there's no way it could go longer than any of our Legend of Galactic Heroes podcasts, but after the way some of these have gone, I am no longer confident.
So we'll do the first part as covering End of Evangelion, similar to how we've been covering the episodes, and then the second part we will do our overall final thoughts on the series. Just empty the tank. G will get to his final statements on his thesis about Evangelion is a mecha anime. I'm sure we'll get into that, and yeah. So everybody, stay tuned for that, and I think we'll wrap up this episode. So,
well, what's next time, Jel?
What's next? Didn't I just tell everybody what's happening next time?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I determined I was not going to do the preview music this week.
Fine.
Yeah, all right.
If you want me to sing "Fly Me to the Moon" or something, maybe, but I'll insert that in later. But yeah, let's just do our housekeeping and wrap up. Read our stuff at theglorioblog.com. Check out all our other podcasts. I just forgot our Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at theglorioblog. Check out all our other podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean. Also uploaded to YouTube. I'm just going to keep that one short. You can go actually read about all the other podcasts there. It's fine. And I think that's it. So, all right. Well, congratulations, guys. We made it. And thank you for...
Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you for joining me on all this. We got one more to go, and we'll catch everybody next time.